we got to talk about the UFC. UFC is dominating the combat sports conversation today on this Friday. UFC 249 goes even more official than it had been before. We knew that Dana was going to bring the UFC back on May 9th, but he has turned it up even more so today. So we do have confirmation from several sources, including Brett Okamoto of ESPN, that UFC 249 will indeed be taking place in Jacksonville, Florida. This is something that Peter and I kind of already knew. It wasn't really solid enough for us to like really run out and say, hey, here's what it is. But we knew based off of just the logistics and different things and different people that were involved that this was going to more than likely take place in Florida. So it is going to be at Jacksonville, Florida, at VyStar Memorial Arena, Veterans Memorial Arena. And not only is that event going to be taking place next month, on the week of May 9th, they're also dropping 3 events that week. You want to talk about playing catch up. And this is a statement from Florida Commission Executive Director Patrick Cunningham. He says, our commission stands ready to sanction the events to be held on May 9th, 13th, and 16th. Health and safety protocols will be in place to ensure the safety and well-being of all individuals. So this is going to take place. I know there's going to be all kinds of things, all sorts of, different parameters set up for the fighters, anybody else that needs to be there. This was really precipitated by an executive order that came from the governor's office maybe 2-3 weeks ago, which kind of laid the groundwork for this. And so I preface this by saying I'm very excited about the return of combat sports, but obviously I'll be more excited once I know that this all can come forward and go forward in safety. And so I'm going to talk to Peter about how he sees this impacting and how quickly after this goes over, we could see boxing and maybe even some other MMA promotions jump into Florida and doing things there as well.
Look, you quoted Patrick Cunningham, a friend of mine who's also the executive director of the Florida State Athletic Commission, who they've always been open for business. Mm-hmm. I will say that for me, safety is the biggest key. If the UFC is able to provide an environment where there's testing and it's safe, I think it's going to be well-received entertainment. I think that it's going to set the tone for how combat sports could move forward. When I was trying to explain to Lou earlier that boxing and MMA is probably the best suited from a personnel standpoint, the ability to not have to, I think it would be a lot stranger to play an NFL game in an 80,000 seat stadium with no one there. I think that'll be a lot. I think you can pull off MMA and boxing and still add some components and some other parts of the production and things like that you had mentioned earlier that can make it work. Not only do I think UFC 249 is gonna be a great card, as you keep pointing out, I think that fans are gonna enjoy watching it on television, and will really. I think the idea of a live audience not being there isn't gonna kill the show. I think it's still gonna. I think the competitors are still gonna go in there and perform just as they would in front of a big audience. Obviously the energy's not there. No one's feeling that lift that you get, that adrenaline boost maybe but I think we're going to see people adapting to this new norm. I think that from so many perspectives, the fact that people are hungry for live sports, I think that from the sports betting component, people being able to finally bet on some sports again. And like I said, if all the safety precautions are taken and this can be done mitigating as much risk as possible, I think you run more risk going to the grocery store to restock up on food than anyone's going to encounter in this environment, because you don't get tested every time you walk back into the grocery store or go to the bank or put gas in your car. I think in large part what's going to happen is they're going to have this protocol. they're going to abide by it, and hope for the best. But I definitely think that there's nothing wrong with it, and I don't see why anyone else would think there's anything wrong with it. I think that it's going to be a welcome distraction from everything that everyone's been going through, and I really believe it's going to end up being the event that opens the door quickly for boxing to get into the picture, and for the UFC to just start moving forward in this new normal until they're able to put people in arenas.
I would agree. I would 100% agree.